"Father, that's Ma." Those 4 words hit Marcus Thornhill harder than any bullet ever could. His hand flew to his pistol, old instincts dying hard, as he stared at the filthy beggar woman in the Abilene dust. 20 years, 20 goddamn years he'd built an empire trying to forget her. And now his son was telling him that this broken, mad creature begging for scraps, was Eleanor. The woman he'd destroyed with his own words. The woman who'd bet her entire ranch on him when he had nothing. His legs went weak, the richest cattle baron in 3 territories, and he couldn't breathe. But how did it come to this? How did the prettiest girl in 3 counties end up in the dirt while he stood in a $1,000 suit? The answer lay 20 years in the past, 1875. Fort Worth, Texas. Marcus Thornhill was a dead man walking. 30 years old, rope-burned hands, and 30 days before the bank took everything. His cattle were dying. His father's ranch was crumbling. He had nothing. Less than nothing. He'd ridden into town that Saturday, not for the church social, but to drink away his last few dollars. That's when he saw her. Eleanor Whitmore. Blue dress, dark hair. Eyes that could see straight through a man's lies. She was surrounded by suitors. Rich ranchers' sons with clean hands and full pockets. Marcus almost rode past. What could a failure offer a woman like that? But something made him stop. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was fate. He tied his horse and walked over, hat in hand, dirt under his fingernails. "Miss Whitmore," he said. "I'm Marcus Thornhill." She turned, looked him up and down. Most women would have dismissed him on sight. Eleanor smiled. "The Thornhill Ranch. Your father was a good man." "Was? Yes, ma'am. I'm doing my best to honor his memory, but—" He trailed off. Why was he telling her this? "But the drought's been hard," she finished, "and the bank doesn't care about honor." Marcus blinked. "You know ranching. My father owned 2,000 acres before he died. I kept his books, managed his hands. I know more about cattle than most men in this town." Something sparked between them. Not just attraction, recognition. Here was someone who understood. They talked for 3 hours that day. While other men bragged about their herds, Marcus told her his vision. Stronger cattle, better roots, building something that would last. Eleanor didn't laugh. She asked questions, smart ones. When the social ended, Marcus rode home feeling something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. He came back the next Saturday, and the next, 15 miles each way after a full day's work, just to sit on her porch until the stars came out. Eleanor would bring him real food, not the beans he'd been surviving on, and they'd talk about breeding programs and railroad contracts and dreams bigger than the Texas sky. 3 months later, Marcus confessed the truth. "I'm losing the ranch, Eleanor. Bank's coming in 2 weeks. I've got nothing left to offer you, nothing left to offer anyone." He expected her to send him away. Instead, she stood up. "Get your hat, Marcus. We're going to town." "What? Why?" "Because I'm about to do something my mother would call insane." The next morning, Eleanor Whitmore walked into the cattleman's bank in Fort Worth. The banker, Mr. Hutchins, looked up from his desk. "Miss Whitmore, what can I do for you?" "I want to mortgage my father's land." Hutchins frowned. "All of it?" "Every acre. That's 2,000 acres of prime grazing land, your entire inheritance." "I'm aware." "May I ask what for?" Eleanor didn't hesitate. "I'm investing in a ranch. And a man." Hutchins tried to talk her out of it. Told her she was throwing away her future, that Marcus Thornhill was a failure, just like his father. Eleanor signed the papers anyway. When she handed Marcus the money that afternoon, his hands shook. "Eleanor, I can't—" "Yes, you can. I believe in you, Marcus Thornhill. Now make me proud." They married that week. No fancy dress, no big celebration. Just promises under the Texas sky and a gamble that would change both their lives forever. If you're wondering how this story ends, hit that like button and subscribe. Because what happens next will break your heart. The first year nearly killed them both. The drought continued. Half their new herd died. Marcus worked dawn to dusk, trying to keep the cattle alive, trying to prove Eleanor's faith wasn't misplaced. Eleanor worked beside him. Not behind him, beside him, mending fences, hauling water. Her hands grew as calloused as his. Then, the rustlers came. 3 men, armed and mean, tried to steal their remaining cattle one night. Marcus fought them off with a rifle in pure desperation, took a bullet in the shoulder but didn't go down. Eleanor patched him up by lamplight. her hands steady even as tears ran down her face. "We're going to make it," she whispered. "We have to." And somehow, impossibly, they did. Marcus's breeding program worked. His new routes to the railheads cut weeks off the drives. Word spread about Thornhill cattle. Buyers came calling. Money started flowing in. The struggling homestead became a successful ranch. Then a large operation. Then an empire spanning 3 territories. But as the money grew, something else began to die. The man who used to ride 15 miles just to sit on Eleanor's porch started sleeping in the bunkhouse during cattle season. The woman who'd worked beside him started eating supper alone. Success was costing them something neither had anticipated. And the worst was yet to come. Because the broke cowboy with impossible dreams was becoming a cattle baron with no time for love. And Eleanor, who'd bet everything on him, was about to pay a price no woman should ever have to pay. The money changed everything. Within 5 years, Marcus Thornhill went from barely surviving to owning the largest cattle operation in Texas. But Eleanor was about to learn that success could be more dangerous than failure, because the man she married was disappearing. 1880. The Thornhill Ranch. Marcus left before dawn. Again. Eleanor woke to an empty bed and the sound of hooves fading into darkness. Another cattle drive. Another month without him. She walked to the window and stared at the empire they'd built together. Thousands of acres. Hundreds of cattle. Bunkhouses full of ranch hands. And she'd never felt more alone. "Ma?" Little Daniel appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Where's Pa? Gone to the railhead, sweetheart?" Again, Eleanor forced a smile. "Again?" But this time felt different. This time, Marcus had left without saying goodbye. The cattle drives were making them rich. Marcus would take herds north to Kansas, sell them to the railroad buyers, and come back with more money than Eleanor's father had made in a lifetime. But each drive took longer. Each absence stretched further. And when Marcus did come home, he wasn't really there. His mind was always somewhere else, on the next deal, the next expansion, the next territory to conquer. "We could buy the Henderson place," he'd say over supper, barely looking at her. "Another 1,000 acres, direct access to the river." "Marcus, we have enough land." "Enough?" He'd look at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "There's no such thing as enough, Eleanor, not in this business." She'd watch him shovel food into his mouth, already planning his next move, and wonder where the man who used to talk to her until the stars came out had gone. The land deals got uglier. Marcus started buying out struggling ranchers. Men who'd been his friends, men who'd helped him when he had nothing. "Tom Patterson's losing his ranch," Eleanor said one evening. "He came by asking if we could help." "I bought it this morning," Marcus interrupted. "Got it for half what it's worth." Eleanor stared at him. "Tom has a wife, 3 children." "Tom made bad decisions. That's not my problem." "Marcus, he helped us during the drought. Remember? He gave us water when... And I paid him back by giving him a fair price for land he was going to lose anyway." Marcus poured himself whiskey. "This is business, Eleanor. Sentiment doesn't build empires." She didn't recognize the man standing in her kitchen. The broke cowboy with rope-burned hands had become a cattle baron with a heart of stone. 1883, 8 years after they married. Eleanor stopped waiting up for Marcus. There was no point. He'd come home from his deals and his drives, sleep a few hours, and leave again before sunrise. Sometimes he'd be gone for weeks. Once, 2 months. The ranch kept growing. Marcus bought out 3 more neighbors, expanded into New Mexico territory, started a second operation in Montana. They were becoming wealthy beyond Eleanor's wildest dreams, and she was becoming a ghost in her own home. She tried to talk to him, tried to remind him of who they used to be. "Remember when we first met?" she asked one rare evening when he was home. "At the church social? You told me about your dreams. Those weren't dreams, Eleanor. They were plans. And I made them happen. We made them happen. Together." Marcus looked at her, and for a moment, she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret? Recognition? But then it was gone. "I have a meeting in Abilene tomorrow. I'll be gone a week." He left before she could respond. The other ranchers' wives tried to comfort her. "You're so lucky," they'd say. "Marcus is so successful, you'll never want for anything." But Eleanor wanted everything they didn't have. She wanted her husband back. She wanted the man who used to ride 15 miles just to see her smile. She wanted the partnership they'd built, not this hollow empire where she was just another possession. Then Daniel turned 9. And everything came to a head. Eleanor wanted to send him to school in town, to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, maybe even music. Marcus had other plans. "He's old enough to work," Marcus announced one morning. "I'm teaching him to rope and brand. He needs to learn the business. He's a child, Marcus. He's my heir, and he needs to be ready." "Ready for what? To become like you? To care about nothing but cattle and land and money?" Marcus's eyes went cold. "Careful, Eleanor." "Or what? You'll leave again? You're already gone." The argument escalated, voices rising, years of resentment pouring out. And then Marcus said the words that would destroy everything. But that's a story for the next part. Because what happened that night didn't just end their marriage. It ended Eleanor's entire life. The empire Marcus built came at a price, and Eleanor Thornhill was about to pay it in full. The night everything shattered started like any other. Marcus came home late. Eleanor was waiting, and their son Daniel was caught in the middle of a war neither parent knew how to stop. But by morning, Eleanor would be gone, and Marcus would spend the next 20 years trying to forget what he'd done. September 1885, the Thornhill Ranch. Absolutely not. Eleanor stood in the doorway of Marcus's study, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "Daniel is going to school in town. I've already spoken to the teacher." Marcus didn't even look up from his ledger. "I said no." "He's 9 years old, Marcus. He needs an education, reading, writing, arithmetic. He needs to learn ranching." Marcus finally looked at her, his eyes hard. "Tomorrow morning he starts working with the hands. I'm teaching him to rope. He's a child. He's my son, and he's going to run this empire someday. That means he learns the business now." Eleanor stepped into the room. "What about what he wants? Have you even asked him?" "What he wants?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "He's 9. He doesn't know what he wants. He wants to read books. He wants to learn music. He asked me last week if he could have a violin." "A violin?" Marcus slammed his hand on the desk. "My son is not going to be some soft city boy playing a goddamn violin." The venom in his voice made Eleanor flinch. But she didn't back down. "Your son? He's our son, Marcus, and I have a say in how he's raised." "You have a say?" Marcus stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "You mortgaged your land, Eleanor. I built this empire. Everything you see belongs to me, including how my son is raised." The words hit like a slap. Eleanor's face went pale. "I can't believe you just said that." "It's the truth." "The truth? The truth is you've forgotten where you came from. You've forgotten who helped you when you had nothing." Marcus poured himself whiskey, his third glass, maybe his fourth. "I haven't forgotten anything," he said, his words starting to slur. "I remember being broke, being a failure, and I swore I'd never be that man again. So you became this instead, a man who works dawn to dusk and barely knows his own son. I'm building something that will last, something Daniel will inherit. He doesn't want an empire, Marcus. He wants a father." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Marcus drank, poured another glass. His hands were shaking now. From anger or whiskey, Eleanor couldn't tell. "You don't understand," he muttered. "You've never understood." "Then help me understand. Talk to me. Like you used to? Like I used to." Marcus laughed, harsh and bitter. "When I was poor, when I was nothing? Is that what you want, Eleanor? You want me to be that broke cowboy again? I want you to be the man I married." "That man is dead," Marcus roared. "He died the day I realized that sentiment and softness don't build empires. They destroy them." Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper. "What happened to you?" "I grew up. Maybe you should too." "Grew up? You've become cruel, Marcus. Cold. You buy out your friends. You work yourself to death. And now you want to do the same to our son. Our son needs to be strong. He needs to be hard. This world will eat him alive if he's soft like—" He stopped. But it was too late. "Like me," Eleanor finished, her voice breaking. "Is that what you were going to say?" Marcus said nothing, just drank. And in that silence, something inside Eleanor cracked. "I sacrificed everything for you," she whispered. "My land, my inheritance, my father's legacy. I bet it all on you when no one else would." "And I made you rich," Marcus shouted. "You live in the biggest house in 3 territories. You have everything a woman could want. Except a husband who loves me." The words hit Marcus like a bullet. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Regret, pain, recognition. But then the whiskey and the anger took over. "You want to know the truth, Eleanor?" His voice was cold now, deadly. "You're weak. You've always been weak. and you're holding me back from my destiny." Eleanor stumbled backward like he'd struck her. "What did you say?" "You heard me. You're dead weight. Always have been. I built this empire in spite of you, not because of you." The room went silent. Eleanor stared at the man she'd loved, the man she'd sacrificed everything for, and she didn't recognize him anymore. "You don't mean that," she whispered. "Don't I?" Eleanor turned and walked out of the study. Marcus heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard her moving around in their bedroom, heard the front door open. He should have gone after her. He should have taken back those words, but the whiskey and the pride kept him in his chair, staring at his ledgers, convincing himself he was right. An hour passed. Then two. When Marcus finally went upstairs, Eleanor was gone. Her coat was missing, a small bag she kept in the closet. Nothing else. He walked outside. The night was dark, moonless. He could hear the prairie wind and the distant sound of cattle. But no Eleanor. "She'll come back," he muttered to himself. "She's just angry. She'll cool off and come back." He went to bed. But Eleanor didn't come back that night, or the next, or ever, because out there in the darkness, something terrible was about to happen. Something that would turn Eleanor Thornhill from a rancher's wife into a ghost. And Marcus wouldn't know the truth for 20 years. Not until that day in Abilene, when his son would whisper 4 words that would bring his entire empire crashing down. "Father, that's Ma." Marcus woke up to an empty house and a lie he'd have to tell for the next 20 years. Eleanor was gone. And he had no idea that the story he was about to create would be easier to believe than the truth, because the truth was out there on the dark prairie, bleeding and broken. But Marcus would never find it. Dawn. September 1885. Marcus stumbled downstairs, his head pounding from whiskey. The house was silent. Too silent. Eleanor? No answer. He checked the kitchen, the parlor, their bedroom again. Her coat was gone. A small bag, but everything else remained. "She'll be back," he muttered. "Just needs to cool off." But when Daniel came down for breakfast, asking where his mother was, Marcus felt the first stab of real fear. She went to town. She'll be back soon." The lie came easily. Too easily. By noon, Marcus was worried. By sunset, he was searching. He rode out with 3 ranch hands, calling Eleanor's name into the darkness. They searched until midnight, found nothing, and returned to the ranch. "Maybe she went to her cousin's place in Fort Worth," one hand suggested. Marcus grabbed onto that hope like a drowning man. "Yes, that's where she went. She needed space. She'll send word." But no word came. 3 days later, the neighbors started asking questions. "Where's Eleanor? Haven't seen her at church." Marcus had his story ready. He'd practiced it in the mirror that morning, hating himself with every word. "She left, went back east, said she couldn't handle ranch life anymore." The lie tasted like poison, but people believed it. Why wouldn't they? Women left the frontier all the time. Too hard, too lonely, too brutal. "I'm sorry, Marcus," they'd say. "Must be difficult." He'd nod, accept their sympathy, and die a little more inside. 1 week after Eleanor disappeared, Marcus couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The guilt was eating him alive. He remembered his words. "You're weak. You're holding me back." What if something had happened to her? What if she was hurt, lost? What if she was dead? He hired the Pinkerton Detective Agency the next morning. "Find my wife," he told the agent, sliding a stack of money across the desk. "Whatever it costs." The Pinkerton man, a weathered detective named Hayes, took notes. "When did she leave?" "A week ago, September 15th. "Any idea where she might have gone?" Marcus hesitated. We had an argument. She left upset. I thought she'd go to Fort Worth, to her cousin's. And her cousin hasn't seen her." Hayes looked up sharply. "So she's been missing for a week, and you're just now reporting it?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "I thought she'd come back." "What was the argument about?" "That's private." Hayes stared at him. "Mr. Thornhill, if you want me to find your wife, I need the truth." But Marcus couldn't give him the truth, because the truth made him a monster. "Just find her," he said. "Please." The Pinkerton investigation. Hayes was thorough. He interviewed everyone. Ranch hands, neighbors, the cousin in Fort Worth. He traced Eleanor's possible routes, checked stagecoach records, asked at every hotel and boarding house between the ranch and Fort Worth. Nothing. It's like she vanished into thin air, Hayes reported 2 weeks later. Last confirmed sighting was at your ranch the night she left. After that, nothing. What about the prairie? Could she have gotten lost? We searched. Found no trace, no body, no belongings. Marcus felt sick. So where is she? Hayes pulled out his notebook. Mr. Thornhill, I have to ask, is it possible your wife didn't want to be found? The question hung in the air. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe she left intentionally. Maybe she had help, a friend, or... Hayes paused. Someone else. The new story. Marcus latched onto it like a lifeline. Maybe Eleanor had run off. Maybe she'd met someone, a drifter, a traveling salesman, someone who'd promised her a better life. It was easier to believe than the alternative. Easier than thinking she was dead because of him. Keep looking, Marcus told Hayes. Expand the search. Check Kansas, Colorado, California if you have to. Hayes did. For 3 months, the Pinkertons searched. They found nothing. December 1885. Hayes delivered his final report. Mr. Thornhill, I'm sorry. The trail is cold. We've checked every lead, followed every possible route. Your wife is either very good at hiding or what? Or she doesn't want to be found. My professional opinion? She left intentionally. Probably with someone. Started a new life somewhere far from here. Marcus wanted to believe it. Needed to believe it. Because the alternative, that Eleanor was dead, that his words had driven her to her death, was unbearable. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Send me your final invoice. After Hayes left, Marcus poured himself whiskey and made a decision. Eleanor had left him, abandoned him and Daniel, run off with some drifter or gone back east to start over. That was the story. That was the truth he'd tell himself. And if he repeated it enough times, maybe he'd start to believe it. The years that followed. Marcus threw himself into work, dawn to dusk, building, expanding, conquering. The empire grew. Texas, New Mexico, Montana, thousands of cattle, tens of thousands of acres. He raised Daniel alone, taught him ranching, made him hard, made him strong, made him into the heir Marcus had always wanted. But late at night, when the house was quiet and the whiskey couldn't numb the pain anymore, Marcus would wonder, where was Eleanor? Was she alive? Was she happy? Did she ever think about him? He'd never know the answer. Not for 20 years. Not until that day in Abilene, when he'd walk past a beggar woman in the dust and his son would say 4 words that would destroy everything Marcus had built. Father, that's Ma, because Eleanor hadn't run away. She hadn't left intentionally. She'd been out there on the prairie that night, broken and bleeding. And what happened to her was worse than death. It was erasure. The complete destruction of everything she'd been. And Marcus was about to learn that some sins can't be buried, no matter how deep you dig. Eleanor ran into the darkness and never came back. Not because she didn't want to, but because by morning she wouldn't remember who she was. September 15th, 1885, 11:47 p.m. Eleanor stumbled across the prairie, tears blinding her, Marcus's words echoing in her skull. You're weak. You're holding me back. She'd grabbed her coat, a small bag, the locket with Daniel's baby hair inside, and she'd run. No plan, no destination, just away, away from the man who'd become a stranger, away from the empire built on her sacrifice, away from the pain that was crushing her chest. The night was moonless, dark as a grave. She should have stopped, should have turned back. But something inside her had broken, shattered like glass, and broken things don't think straight. She walked for hours. Her feet bled through her boots. Her dress caught on sagebrush. The prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, and slowly, terribly, Eleanor's mind began to fracture. Marcus's words played on repeat. Dead weight, always have been. Had she really sacrificed everything for nothing? Had her love meant nothing? Had she been a fool? The thoughts spiraled. Darker, deeper. She started talking to herself, arguing with voices that weren't there. I believed in you, Marcus, but he never believed in you. I gave you everything, and he threw it away. Daniel needs me. Daniel needs a mother who isn't weak. By dawn, Eleanor Thornhill was no longer entirely sane. September 16th, just before sunrise. Eleanor heard horses. She turned, hope flaring in her chest. Marcus had come for her. He'd apologized. 3 riders emerged from the darkness. Not ranch hands, outlaws. She could tell by their faces. Hard, mean, hungry. Well, well, the leader said, circling her on his horse. What's a lady doing out here all alone? Eleanor's voice shook. I'm lost. I need to get home. My son— Your son, the outlaw grinned. Where's home, lady? She opened her mouth and realized she couldn't remember. The ranch. Where was the ranch? Which direction? The mental break was complete. I don't— The outlaws laughed. They took everything. Her horse, the one she'd ridden out on, now found grazing nearby. Her bag with the few belongings she'd packed. And worst of all, the locket. Please, Eleanor begged, reaching for it. That's my son's hair. It's all I have. Please. The outlaw dangled it in front of her face. Pretty thing. Might fetch a few dollars. He pocketed it. Eleanor lunged for him, screaming. He shoved her hard. She hit the ground, her head cracking against a rock. The world spun. Blood trickled down her temple. The outlaws rode off, laughing, leaving her in the dirt. And Eleanor Thornhill, who'd once owned 2,000 acres and hosted barn dances, lay broken in the prairie dust, her mind shattering into 1,000 pieces. If you're still watching, drop a like and subscribe, because what happens next will make you weep. 2 days later. Sister Maria found her. The nun was riding back to the mission when she saw the body lying in the sagebrush. At first, she thought the woman was dead, but then Eleanor moaned. Madre de Dios. Sister Maria whispered, dismounting. Can you hear me? Eleanor's eyes opened, unfocused, wild. Daniel, she whispered. Where's Daniel? Who's Daniel, child? My son. I need to find— She tried to sit up, collapsed. Sister Maria got her onto the horse and rode hard for the mission of San Miguel. The nuns cared for her, cleaned her wounds, fed her broth, prayed over her. But Eleanor's mind was gone. She'd wake up screaming about a man with angry eyes, about cattle and blood and words that cut like knives. What's your name? The nuns would ask. Eleanor would stare at them blankly. I don't know. Where are you from? I don't— There was a ranch and a boy. Daniel. His name is Daniel. Daniel who? Silence. The memories were there. Fragments. Pieces of a shattered mirror. A child's laughter. A man's voice, cold and cruel. The smell of cattle and sage. A blue dress. Rope-burned hands. But she couldn't put them together. Couldn't make them whole. The nuns kept her for 3 months. Hoped her memory would return. It didn't. December 1885. We can't keep her forever, Mother Superior said sadly. We don't have the resources. Sister Maria looked at Eleanor, who sat by the window, humming a lullaby she didn't remember learning. Where will she go? Into God's hands. They gave Eleanor clean clothes, a little money, directions to the nearest town, and sent her out into the world. A woman with no name, no past, no future, just fragments of a life she couldn't remember and a pain she couldn't explain. Eleanor Thornhill was dead. In her place was a ghost, and that ghost would wander the frontier for the next 20 years, invisible and forgotten, while the man who destroyed her built an empire and convinced himself she'd wanted to leave. But the truth was coming, in Abilene, in the dust. When a son would recognize his mother and a father would finally face what he'd done. 20 years is a long time to be invisible, long enough for the world to forget you ever existed, long enough to forget yourself. Eleanor Thornhill, or the woman who used to be Eleanor Thornhill, was about to learn that some fates are worse than death, because death is final. But this was endless. 1886, Fort Worth, Texas. The woman with no name sat outside the general store, her hand outstretched. Spare change, sir? Ma'am? Most people walked past without looking. She'd learned that quickly. Poor folks were invisible, especially poor women. An old rancher dropped a nickel in her palm. Get yourself some food, miss. Thank you, she whispered. God bless you. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. Yesterday? 2 days ago? Time had stopped meaning anything. She bought a piece of bread and ate it slowly, savoring every bite. Then she found a spot behind the saloon to sleep. This was her life now, and she didn't even know why. Sometimes fragments would surface. She'd hear a child laugh and feel a sharp pain in her chest, a longing for something, someone she couldn't name. She'd smell cattle and sage and feel tears on her face without knowing why. She'd see a man in a fine suit and feel terror, rage, grief, but the memories never stayed. They'd flicker like dying candles and disappear. leaving her more lost than before. 1888, Dodge City, Kansas. "Move along, beggar, you're bad for business." The saloon owner kicked her awake. She scrambled to her feet, clutching her thin blanket. "I'm sorry, I'll go. I just needed—" "I don't care what you need. Get out of here before I call the sheriff." She wandered to the edge of town and found an abandoned barn. It would do for the night. Inside, she found an old newspaper. She couldn't read most of it. The words swam on the page. But there was a picture. A cattle baron, Marcus something, big ranch in Texas. She stared at the face. Did she know him? The man's eyes were hard, cold, successful. She felt something stir, fear, hatred. She crumpled the paper and used it to start a small fire for warmth. By morning, she'd forgotten she'd ever seen it. 1891, Abilene, Kansas. The woman who used to host barn dances now sat in the dust outside the cattleman's hotel. She didn't remember the dances, didn't remember the silk dresses or the laughter or the music. All she knew was hunger, cold, loneliness. "Please, sir, anything you can spare." A cowboy tossed her a coin without looking at her face. She was invisible, a ghost. The world had forgotten her name, and she'd forgotten it too. 1893, Wichita, Kansas. A kind woman stopped one day, actually looked at her. "What's your name, dear?" The question always hurt, like pressing on a bruise. I don't know." "You don't know your own name?" "I can't remember. I've tried. I just can't." The woman's face softened with pity. "Where are you from?" "Texas, I think. Maybe. There was a ranch and a boy. Daniel. I remember Daniel." "Daniel who?" Silence. The woman gave her $1 and a sandwich. "God bless you, dear." Then she walked away. And the woman with no name ate her sandwich and tried not to cry, because crying meant feeling, and feeling hurt too much. 1895, back to Abilene. She drifted in circles for years, town to town, Kansas, Texas, New Mexico, back to Kansas, always moving, never arriving. Her mind had deteriorated further. She talked to herself now, argued with voices only she could hear. People crossed the street to avoid her. "Crazy beggar woman," they'd mutter. She'd become a fixture in Abilene, part of the scenery, as invisible as the dust. The elegant rancher's wife who'd once mortgaged 2,000 acres was gone. In her place was a broken creature who sat outside saloons, begging for coins, her hair matted, her dress in rags, her eyes vacant. September 1895, 20 years after she disappeared. She sat in her usual spot outside the cattleman's hotel. The sun was hot, her throat was dry. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. A fancy carriage pulled up, rich folks, cattle barons probably. She held out her hand automatically. "Spare change?" They walked past without looking. Of course they did. She was invisible. She'd been invisible for 20 years. But then something happened. A young man, 25, maybe, stopped, stared at her. She looked up, confused. Why was he staring? The young man's face went pale. His hand trembled. "Pa," he whispered to the older man beside him. "Pa, look at her wrist." The older man turned, looked at her, and froze. She stared back at them, confused. Did she know these men? The older one looked like he'd seen a ghost. His hand went to his hip, old habit maybe, and his legs seemed to give out. "Father," the young man said, his voice cracking. "That's Ma." "Ma?" The word echoed in her broken mind. Ma? Mother? She'd been a mother once, hadn't she? Daniel. The boy's name was Daniel. She looked at the young man, really looked, and somewhere in the shattered ruins of her memory, something stirred. Those eyes. She knew those eyes. "Daniel?" she whispered. The young man's face crumpled. Tears streamed down his cheeks. "Yes, Ma, it's me." "It's Daniel." And the older man, the one who looked like he'd been shot, stared at her with horror and recognition and guilt so profound, it seemed to age him 20 years in an instant. Marcus. His name was Marcus. And suddenly, fragments began to surface. "You're weak. You're holding me back." The woman who'd been invisible for 20 years looked at the cattle baron who destroyed her. And for the first time in 2 decades, Eleanor Thornhill remembered who she was and what he'd done. Daniel Thornhill had spent his entire life searching for a ghost, a woman in a faded photograph, a mother he barely remembered. And today, in the dust outside the cattleman's hotel, he was about to find her. But the reunion would destroy everything he thought he knew. September 1895. Abilene, Kansas. Daniel walked beside his father through the busy street, discussing cattle prices and railroad contracts. At 25, he was Marcus Thornhill's foreman, his right hand, his heir, everything his father had groomed him to be. But there was a hole in Daniel's chest that no amount of success could fill. His mother, Eleanor Thornhill, gone for 20 years. She abandoned us, Marcus had told him 1,000 times, ran off, couldn't handle ranch life. But Daniel had never believed it, not completely, because he remembered things, small things, a woman's soft voice singing him to sleep, gentle hands braiding his hair, the smell of lavender and bread, a mother who loved him, and that woman wouldn't have just left. They approached the cattleman's hotel for a business meeting. Daniel barely noticed the beggar woman sitting in the dust. There were always beggars. The frontier was full of broken people. But then she moved, a small gesture, her hand going to her temple, fingers pressing against her head like she was trying to remember something. Daniel froze. He knew that gesture. His mother used to do that, when she was thinking, when she was troubled. He'd seen it in his memories, seen it 1,000 times as a child. "Pa," he said quietly. "Wait." Marcus kept walking. "We're late for the meeting. Pa, stop." Something in Daniel's voice made Marcus turn. Daniel was staring at the beggar woman. "What is it?" Daniel didn't answer. He moved closer. The woman looked up. Her face was weathered, dirty, her hair matted and gray. But her eyes, God, her eyes, Daniel had inherited his mother's eyes. Everyone said so. The same gentle brown, the same shape. And this woman had those exact eyes. "Ma'am," Daniel said softly, kneeling in the dust. "What's your name?" The woman blinked at him, confused. I don't know." "You don't know your name?" "Can't remember. Been trying for years." Daniel's heart was pounding. "Where are you from?" "Texas, maybe. There was a ranch, and a boy." Her voice cracked. "Daniel." His name was Daniel. The world stopped. Marcus went rigid behind him. Daniel's hands were shaking. What else do you remember?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "A lullaby. I used to sing. How did it go?" She started humming. Softly, hesitantly, a melody Daniel hadn't heard in 20 years. But he knew it. God help him, he knew it. His mother used to sing it every night, tucking him in, kissing his forehead. "Sleep, my darling, sleep so sound, angels watch you all around." "Ma?" Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. The woman stared at him. "Daniel?" Yes, it's me. It's Daniel." She reached out with a trembling hand and touched his face. "You're so big. You were just a boy. You were just—" Her hand fell away, the memory slipping like water through fingers. Daniel grabbed her wrist gently and saw it. The scar, a distinctive mark on her left wrist, from a branding iron accident when he was 7 years old. She'd been helping with the cattle and gotten burned. He remembered her wrapping it, remembered his father yelling at her for being careless, remembered kissing it better. The scar was still there, faded but unmistakable. "Father," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "Look at her wrist." Marcus hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. He stood frozen, his face ashen. "Father, look!" Marcus took a step forward. His eyes found the scar, and Daniel watched his father's entire world collapse. "Eleanor?" Marcus whispered. The woman looked at him, and something dark flickered in her eyes. Fear, rage, pain. "You," she breathed. "I know you. Eleanor, you said I was weak." Her voice was rising. "You said I was holding you back. You said—" She started shaking, memories flooding back. 20 years of fragments suddenly connecting. "You destroyed me," she whispered. "You destroyed me and I ran, and they took everything, and I couldn't remember, and I've been lost for so long." She collapsed, sobbing. Daniel caught her, held her. This broken woman who was his mother. "It's okay, Ma. I've got you. You're safe now." But she wasn't safe. She'd never be safe again, because the mind that had shattered 20 years ago couldn't be put back together. Marcus stood there watching his son hold the wife he'd destroyed. The empire he'd built suddenly meant nothing. The respect, the wealth, the land stretching to the horizon. All of it was dust. Because here, in the street, was the price of his ambition. A woman who'd loved him, who'd sacrificed everything for him, reduced to a beggar, her mind shattered, her life stolen. And it was his fault. All his fault. "What have I done?" Marcus whispered. Daniel looked up at his father, and for the first time in his life, he saw Marcus Thornhill clearly. Not as a cattle baron, not as a successful rancher, but as the man who destroyed his own family. "You drove her away," Daniel said quietly, "and you let me believe she abandoned us. I didn't know. You didn't look. You hired Pinkertons for 3 months and then gave up. You convinced yourself she'd left because it was easier than facing what you'd done." Marcus had no answer, because Daniel was right. People were gathering now, staring, whispering. "Is that Eleanor Thornhill? I thought she was dead. She's been here the whole time, begging?" The scandal would be enormous. But Marcus didn't care about scandal anymore. He knelt in the dust beside his wife. "Eleanor," he said, his voice breaking, "I'm sorry. God forgive me. I'm so sorry." Eleanor looked at him with eyes that had seen too much suffering. "Sorry doesn't give me back 20 years, she whispered. And Marcus Thornhill, the richest cattle baron in 3 territories, wept in the street, because some things can't be fixed, some things can't be forgiven, and some prices are too high to ever repay. "Father, that's Ma." 4 words. That's all it took to bring down an empire. Marcus Thornhill froze mid-stride on the dusty Abilene street, his hand flying instinctively to his hip, reaching for a pistol he no longer wore. Old habits from a life that suddenly felt like a lie. Because the beggar woman in the dust wasn't just any beggar. She was Eleanor, his wife, the woman he'd destroyed. The street went silent. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe the world kept moving. Horses, wagons, people going about their business. But Marcus couldn't hear any of it. All he could hear was his own heartbeat, thundering, deafening. All he could see was her, Eleanor. 20 years older, filthy, broken, her hair matted and gray, her dress in rags, her eyes, those gentle eyes he'd fallen in love with, now hollow and haunted. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be Eleanor. Eleanor had left, run away, started a new life somewhere. That's what he'd told himself for 20 years. That's what he'd needed to believe. But Daniel was kneeling beside her now, holding her hand, tears streaming down his face. And the woman was looking at Marcus with recognition, with memory, with hatred. "No," Marcus whispered. "No, this isn't. Look at her wrist, Father." Daniel's voice was cold, hard. "The scar, from the branding iron, when I was 7. Marcus's eyes found the scar. Distinctive, unmistakable. The world tilted. His legs went weak. He stumbled backward, catching himself against a hitching post. "Eleanor?" His voice cracked. Is that really you?" The woman stared at him. And when she spoke, her voice was a ghost's whisper. "You said I was weak." The words hit like bullets. "You said I was holding you back from your destiny." Marcus couldn't breathe. "Eleanor, I ran into the darkness because of you." Her voice was rising now, shaking. "And they found me, the outlaws. They took everything, my horse, my bag, the locket with Daniel's hair." She was standing now, Daniel supporting her. "They left me in the dirt, and I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember who I was or where I came from or why I was so broken inside." People were gathering, a crowd forming. Marcus barely noticed. All he could see was Eleanor. All he could hear was her voice. 20 years, she said. 20 years I've been lost, begging, starving, sleeping in alleys, and you." She laughed, bitter and broken. "You built an empire." Marcus tried to speak, couldn't find words. What could he possibly say? What words could undo 20 years of suffering? "I looked for you," he finally managed. "I hired Pinkertons. I searched." "For 3 months." Daniel's voice cut through. "You searched for 3 months and then gave up." "The trail was cold. They said what you wanted to hear," Daniel shouted. "That she'd left, that she'd run away, because that was easier than admitting what you'd done." The crowd murmured, whispered. Marcus Thornhill, the great cattle baron. His wife had been begging in the streets while he got rich. The scandal would destroy him. But Marcus didn't care about scandal, because standing there, looking at Eleanor, at what he'd done to her, he realized something. The empire meant nothing. The thousands of head of cattle, the land stretching across 3 territories, the respect of every rancher from Texas to Montana. All of it was dust, meaningless. He'd spent 20 years building, expanding, conquering. And for what? To fill the void Eleanor had left, to prove he didn't need her, to convince himself he wasn't the monster who'd driven his wife into the darkness with cruel words and whiskey-fueled rage. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry." "Sorry." Eleanor's laugh was hollow. "Sorry doesn't give me back my mind. Sorry doesn't give me back 20 years. Sorry doesn't—" She collapsed. Daniel caught her, lowering her gently to the ground. "She needs a doctor," someone in the crowd said. "Get Doc Morrison. Someone bring water." Marcus knelt in the dust beside his wife. His expensive suit, worth more than most men made in a year, was ruined, covered in dirt. He didn't care. "Eleanor," he said softly, "can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open. Unfocused, confused. "Who are you?" she whispered. The question destroyed him. I'm Marcus, your husband." "Husband?" She looked at him like he was a stranger. I can't." The memories were slipping again, fragmenting. 20 years of mental deterioration couldn't be undone in a moment of recognition. "Ma, it's okay." Daniel held her hand. "You're safe now. We're going to take care of you." "Daniel?" She focused on him. "My boy, you're so big." "Yes, Ma, I'm here." She smiled, a broken, heartbreaking smile. Then her eyes found Marcus again, and the smile died. "You hurt me," she whispered. "I remember now. You hurt me so badly." Marcus's face crumpled. "I know. God forgive me, I know." Doc Morrison arrived. Examined Eleanor. Shook his head. "She's malnourished, dehydrated, and her mind—" He looked at Marcus. "How long has she been like this?" 20 years, Daniel said quietly. The doctor's eyes widened. 20 years? And you're just now? "We thought she was dead," Marcus said. "Or gone. We didn't know." "Didn't know?" The doctor's voice was sharp. "Or didn't look hard enough?" Marcus had no answer, because the doctor was right. He hadn't looked hard enough. He'd given up. He'd convinced himself Eleanor had wanted to leave, because facing the truth that his words had driven her to madness was too painful. They carried Eleanor to the hotel. Put her in the finest room. Called for the best doctors. Marcus spared no expense, but money couldn't fix this. Money couldn't restore a shattered mind. Money couldn't give Eleanor back the 20 years she'd lost. That night, Marcus sat in his own hotel room, staring at his hands. These hands had built an empire. These hands had signed deals worth millions. These hands had shaped the frontier, and these hands had destroyed the only woman who'd ever believed in him. He poured himself whiskey, stared at the glass, then threw it against the wall. The whiskey had started this, that night 20 years ago. The rage, the words. "You're weak, you're holding me back." He'd been drunk, angry, ambitious, and he'd destroyed everything that mattered. A knock on the door. Daniel entered. His face was hard, cold. "She's sleeping," he said. "Doctor gave her laudanum." Marcus nodded. Will she recover? Physically, maybe. Mentally?" Daniel shook his head. "The doctor says 20 years of trauma. It's unlikely she'll ever be whole again." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "Daniel, Don't!" Daniel's voice was ice. "Don't try to explain. Don't try to justify. You did this, Father. You drove her away. You gave up looking. You let her suffer for 20 years while you built your precious empire." "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," Daniel shouted. "Because knowing would mean admitting what you'd done. It was easier to believe she'd left, easier to play the victim." Marcus had no defense, because every word was true. "What happens now?" Marcus asked quietly. "Now?" Daniel looked at him with disgust. "Now we take care of her. We give her the life you stole from her, and you—" He paused. "You live with what you've done." Daniel turned to leave. "Son, please." "Don't call me that." Daniel stopped at the door. "You stopped being my father the night you drove my mother into the darkness. You're just the man who shares my name." He left, and Marcus Thornhill, the richest cattle baron in 3 territories, sat alone in his hotel room, surrounded by wealth, drowning in guilt. His empire built on the ruins of the woman who'd made it all possible, the woman he'd destroyed, the woman he'd never be able to save. Because some sins are too great for redemption, some prices too high to ever repay, and Marcus Thornhill would spend the rest of his life learning that lesson, in the dust, in the darkness. in the ruins of everything he'd built. The end. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, success means nothing if you destroy the people who helped you achieve it. Thanks for watching.